Ethan had been my anchor for 28 years, the straight-arrow guy who grounded me through every storm life hurled our way. Growing up on Brooklyn's gritty streets, we went from playground scrapes to high school heartbreaks, always having each other's backs like brothers forged in the fires of adolescence. The projects where we grew up weren't kind to anyone, but especially not to kids who were different. I learned early to keep my head down, to blend in, to survive. I came out as gay at 18, and Ethan never flinched, not even for a second. When Tommy Rodriguez called me a slur in the school hallway, Ethan didn't hesitate to punch him square in the jaw, earning himself a suspension and a reputation as someone you didn't mess with. He stood by me at my first Pride parade, awkward in his cargo shorts and Yankees cap, looking completely out of place among the rainbow flags and glitter, but there nonetheless because I asked him to be. "You sure about this, Ty?" he'd asked that morning, fidgeting with his keys outside my apartment. "I mean, I support you, man, but this whole scene, it's not really my thing." "I know," I'd replied, adjusting the small rainbow pin on his shirt that I'd convinced him to wear, "but it means everything that you're here." And he was there through it all, through the stares from his construction buddies when they saw photos on social media, through the awkward questions from his family, through the gradual shift in how some people in our neighborhood looked at him for having a gay best friend. He weathered it all with that steady loyalty I'd come to depend on. But deep down, buried in a place I rarely let my conscious mind visit, I harbored a secret crush on him that had been growing stronger with each passing year. His easy confidence, the way he'd throw his head back when he laughed, his protective nature, it all pulled at me like gravity, an inescapable force I couldn't name or acknowledge without risking everything we'd built. I buried these feelings deep, knowing he chased women with the single-minded determination of a man convinced he knew exactly what he wanted. He talked endlessly about settling down, about finding the one, about the white picket fence life his parents had modeled for him in their cramped but love-filled apartment in Bensonhurst. His conquests were legendary among our friend group: Sarah from the deli who made him sandwiches with extra pickles, Monica from his construction crew who laughed at all his jokes, Jessica from the neighborhood bar who'd slip him free beers when her manager wasn't looking. "I'm gonna marry a girl like my mom," he'd say, usually after a few beers, his voice taking on that dreamy quality it got when he talked about the future. "Someone who can cook, who wants kids, who'll make a real home, you know. None of this complicated modern stuff, just simple, real love." I'd nod and smile and die a little inside each time, wondering what it said about me that I couldn't give him that simplicity he craved, couldn't be the uncomplicated love story he was writing in his head. The years blurred together: college, where we went to different schools but texted constantly; our early 20s, where we shared that terrible apartment with the broken heater and the upstairs neighbors who fought every night; our late 20s, where we finally got our acts together and moved to separate places but still saw each other almost daily. Through job changes and family dramas, through my coming out to my own conservative Italian family, which went about as well as you'd expect, through his dad's heart attack and recovery, through my mother's diagnosis and treatment, we were constants in each other's lives. But I was always aware, painfully aware, of the boundary between us, the invisible line that separated acceptable friendship from something more dangerous, something that could destroy everything if I ever dared to cross it. One humid Tuesday evening at our usual dive bar in Williamsburg, a place called Mickey's that smelled of stale beer and had sawdust on the floors, Ethan slammed his Budweiser down with more force than necessary, the foam sloshing over the rim. "Ty, you can't bail on me," he pleaded, his blue eyes wide with genuine panic. His buddy Marcus had ditched him for Jets tickets against the Patriots, a rivalry game that meant everything to him, apparently. The tickets had cost him 2 weeks' worth of overtime pay, and now he was facing the prospect of going alone or not going at all. "I hate football," I shot back, not looking up from my phone where I was scrolling through Instagram posts from friends living their best lives in places that weren't Brooklyn dive bars. "It's just grown men tackling each other for millions while fans scream nonsense and pretend it matters." "But it does matter," Ethan's voice cracked slightly, and I could hear the desperation creeping in. "This is the Jets we're talking about. My dad took me to my first game when I was 8. We've had season tickets in the family for 15 years. Marcus knows this. He knows how important this is, and he bails for some corporate event his girlfriend's making him attend." I looked up then, seeing the genuine hurt in his expression. Ethan didn't ask for much. He was the kind of friend who gave more than he took, who showed up when you needed him without being asked, who remembered your birthday and your mother's surgery date and the anniversary of your breakups. But Ethan wouldn't quit. He launched into a full campaign, pulling up stats on his phone, reminding me of all the times he'd endured my indie film marathons and poetry readings, promising to buy all the beer and food, even offering to drive so I wouldn't have to deal with the subway crowds. It's life or death, man. These tickets cost a fortune. Come on, for old times. Remember when you dragged me to that experimental theater thing where the actors didn't speak for 2 hours? I sat through that. I didn't understand a damn thing, but I sat through it because you asked me to. I rolled my eyes, but his desperation sparked something in me, an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. Fine, I said slowly, watching his face light up. But you owe me big. You'll come with me to whatever I want, no complaints, no backing out, no matter what it is. He grinned, clueless to what he was signing up for, just relieved to have company for his precious game. Deal. Whatever you want, man. You want to go to another one of those weird art shows? Done. You want to try that vegan place you're always talking about? I'm in. Little did he know Pride Month was peaking, and I'd been eyeing a massive after-party at a Manhattan gay club that everyone was talking about, the kind of event that made headlines and featured DJs flown in from Ibiza. It was my chance to push him out of his comfort zone, to see how deep his acceptance really ran when faced with my world head-on. And maybe, selfishly, it was a chance to see if my feelings had any shot in hell, or if I could finally put them to rest once and for all. The game was absolute chaos, 80,000 fans roaring at MetLife Stadium, their voices creating a wall of sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. The smell of hot dogs and beer hung heavy in the air, mixed with the autumn chill and the exhaust from the parking lot. Ethan transformed into a complete fanatic, yelling himself hoarse with every play, leaping to his feet, high-fiving strangers, painting his face with green and white stripes he'd bought from a vendor. I endured it all, stealing glances at the players' athletic forms when they bent over in their huddles, but mostly watching Ethan, watching the way his eyes lit up when his team scored, the way he pumped his fist in the air, the way he became someone completely different in this environment. After a particularly spectacular touchdown that had the entire stadium on its feet, he crushed me in a bear hug, his body pressed close against mine, solid and warm and smelling of beer and that cologne he'd worn since high school. The contact sent a forbidden spark through me, electric and dangerous and everything I'd been trying to suppress for years. For just a moment, wrapped in his arms with 80,000 people cheering around us, I let myself imagine what it would be like if this meant something more than friendship, if he could hold me like this and mean it the way I wanted him to. But I pushed it down, focusing on our deal, on the fact that he had no idea what he'd agreed to, on the sweet revenge I was about to exact for 3.5 hours of sports-induced torture. Weeks later, after letting the anticipation build and watching him forget all about our agreement, I decided to cash in my chips. "Remember your promise," I said casually over pizza at my apartment, a greasy box of Joes between us on my coffee table while we half-watched a rerun of The Office. I flipped my laptop around to show him the club promo I'd been studying for days. A slick video featuring throbbing electronic beats, shirtless dancers with perfect abs glistening under rainbow-colored lights, drag queens in elaborate costumes, and crowds of beautiful people losing themselves to the music. The Pride After-Party was being billed as the biggest event of the season, featuring 3 floors of different music, professional dancers, and guest appearances from local drag celebrities. "Pulse," I said, watching his face carefully. "It's the hottest gay club in Manhattan right now. They're throwing a massive Pride After-Party this weekend, and you're coming with me." Ethan's face drained of color so quickly I thought he might actually faint. His slice of pizza hung forgotten in his hand, cheese slowly sliding off the crust. I thought you'd drag me to some art show or that weird coffee place in Park Slope where they serve everything in mason jars." Panic flashed in his eyes, raw and unmistakable. I knew his family, conservative Italian-Americans from Staten Island who still went to Mass every Sunday and believed in traditional values with the fervor of true believers. He'd mentioned their subtle digs about staying on the right path, especially after his cousin Vincent came out 2 years ago and got completely disowned by the entire extended family. No one even spoke Vincent's name at family gatherings anymore, as if he'd simply ceased to exist. "My aunt still crosses herself when she drives past gay bars," he once confided in me after a particularly tense family dinner. "She thinks it's contagious or something, and my dad, man, he still uses words I can't even repeat when he talks about those people. They pretend to be okay with you because they have to be, because you're my friend, but I see the way they look at you sometimes." "You're coming," I insisted, not backing down despite the genuine distress I could see building in his expression. "1 hour, then we're out if you absolutely hate it. But you gave me your word, and I sat through 4 hours of grown men giving each other concussions for your entertainment." He sighed, bound by his word and his own sense of honor. Ethan had always been the kind of person who kept his promises even when they cost him. "Fine, but just an hour, and you owe me for this, big time." In the cab ride to Manhattan, tension thickened between us like fog. Ethan fidgeted constantly, his knuckles white as he gripped his knees, staring out the window at the city lights sliding past. The closer we got to the club, the quieter he became, until the silence was so heavy I could practically taste his anxiety. My folks would absolutely lose their minds if they knew where I was going, he muttered, more to himself than to me. They expect me to settle down with some nice Italian girl from the neighborhood, marry her in the same church where they got married, have kids, keep the traditions alive. The whole deal. They've been hinting about it more and more lately, asking when I'm going to bring someone home for Sunday dinner, wondering out loud about grandchildren. I felt a familiar pang in my chest. His fear mirrored so many LGBT struggles I'd witnessed over the years, the countless stories of young people hiding their truth to avoid rejection from the people they loved most. But hearing it from him, seeing his genuine terror at the thought of his family's disapproval, made something twist inside me. How many times had he watched me navigate my own family's complicated relationship with my sexuality? How many times had he seen me choose authenticity over comfort? They don't have to know, I said quietly. This is just friends hanging out. You're supporting your gay best friend at a pride event. That's actually pretty noble of you. But even as I said it, I wondered if there was something more behind his panic, something deeper than just worry about his family's reaction. The club hit us like a physical force the moment we stepped through the doors. The bass line of some remix I didn't recognize thrummed through the floor, up through our feet, into our chests. Bodies moved everywhere, grinding, dancing, kissing, touching, under strobing lights that turned everything into a kaleidoscope of color and motion. The air was thick with sweat and cologne and something electric that might have been pure joy. Ethan froze at the entrance, his eyes wide and darting everywhere at once, taking in the drag queen on the stage lip-syncing to Beyoncé, the couples making out in corners, the shirtless bartenders mixing drinks with theatrical flair. "I don't belong here," he said, his voice barely audible over the music. I pulled him through the crowd toward the bar, weaving between dancers and dodging the occasional wandering hand. The bartender, a gorgeous black man with arms that belonged in a fitness magazine, smiled at us warmly. "First time?" he asked, already reaching for bottles. "For him," I said, pointing at Ethan. "2 shots of your best vodka, he needs courage." The shots arrived in rainbow-colored shot glasses, and I held mine up in a toast. "To new experiences," I said, and Ethan reluctantly clinked his glass against mine before downing the vodka in one gulp, grimacing at the burn. A cute guy with bleached hair and a perfectly sculpted jawline approached us, clearly interested in Ethan. "Hey there, handsome," he said with a confident smile. "Wanna dance?" Ethan's reaction was immediate and harsh. "Back off," he snapped, his voice carrying an edge I'd never heard before. "I'm not interested." The guy raised his hands in surrender and melted back into the crowd, and I groaned. "Jesus, Ethan, relax, he was just being friendly. That's how it works here, people are open, they're direct, it's not an attack." I know," he said, running his hand through his hair. "I'm sorry, it's a lot." We found a corner table where he could observe without being too much in the thick of things, and I ordered us a round of beers. As the alcohol worked its magic, Ethan began to loosen up, his shoulders dropping from their hunched position, his jaw unclenching. His foot started tapping to the beat almost involuntarily, and I caught him watching the dancers with something that looked less like horror and more like curiosity. "The music's actually pretty good," he admitted after his third beer, having to lean close to my ear to be heard over the pounding bass. A remix of an old Madonna song dropped, and the entire club erupted in cheers. The energy was infectious, pure, unadulterated joy made manifest in movement and sound. I started dancing in my seat, just letting the rhythm move through me, and after a moment of hesitation, Ethan joined in, awkward at first but gradually finding his groove. For a moment it was pure magic, 2 friends lost in the rhythm, the walls between us temporarily dissolved by music and alcohol and the strange democracy of the dance floor. Ethan was actually smiling, really smiling, his guard down in a way I hadn't seen in years. But then he stood up abruptly, mumbling something about getting us more drinks, and disappeared into the crowd. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The initial buzz of alcohol was wearing off, replaced by a growing unease. I checked my phone, no messages. I scanned the dance floor, the bar, even the bathroom line. Nothing. Worry began to gnaw at me, starting as a small knot in my stomach and growing with each passing minute. Had he bilayed? Had someone said something to him? Had the whole experience finally overwhelmed him to the point where he'd just left me there? I started pushing through the crowd more frantically, calling his name even though I knew he couldn't hear me over the music, checking every corner and alcove in the sprawling club. Pushing through sweat-slicked dancers and dodging glowing glow sticks and raised hands, I finally spotted him in a dim alcove near the back of the club, partially hidden by a pillar and a cluster of tall plants. What I saw there shattered every assumption I'd ever had about my best friend, about our friendship, about everything I thought I knew about the world. Ethan, my straight, woman-chasing, family value-spouting best friend, had a guy pinned against the wall, their bodies pressed together in a way that left no room for misinterpretation. Their lips were fused in a hungry, desperate kiss that spoke of need and longing and years of suppressed desire. This wasn't some drunken mistake or a moment of confusion. It was raw, honest passion, the kind I'd dreamed about but never thought I'd see from him. My world tilted on its axis. Everything I'd believed, every conversation we'd had about women and relationships and his future plans, suddenly recontextualized itself in my mind. Had he been lying to me for years? Had he been lying to himself? The guy, tall, dark-haired, with the kind of confident swagger that came from knowing exactly what he wanted, pulled away and whispered something in Ethan's ear that made him shudder visibly. Then he melted back into the crowd, leaving Ethan looking dazed and flushed against the wall. But before I could process what I'd just witnessed, another man approached, this one shorter, more aggressive, with sleeve tattoos and perfectly styled hair. Without hesitation, Ethan dove in again, his hands roaming with desperate need, fingers tangling in the stranger's hair, bodies moving together to the rhythm of the music and something deeper, something primal. Betrayal hit me like ice water in my veins. 28 years of friendship built on what exactly? Lies, half-truths, and worse than the deception was the crushing realization that my unrequited crush had just become infinitely more complicated. Had he felt this way all along, struggling with the same feelings I'd been burying, or was this something else entirely? Experimentation, rebellion, a reaction to being in this environment? The questions multiplied in my mind like a virus, each one spawning three more. How long had he known? How many other secrets was he keeping? And most painfully, why hadn't he trusted me enough to tell me the truth when he knew better than anyone what it was like to wrestle with identity and desire? Society's weight crushed down on me too as I watched him. This was exactly what every homophobic parent warned their children about: the corruption, the seduction, the idea that sexuality could be influenced or changed by environment. Except this wasn't corruption, this was revelation. This was someone finally admitting to himself who he really was, or at least who he could be. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, the pulsing music suddenly mocking me with its relentless optimism. The rainbow lights that had seemed magical an hour ago now felt garish and overwhelming, turning everyone into surreal, distorted versions of themselves. Outside, the cool night air hit me like a slap, and I gasped for breath, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. The street was busy with typical Manhattan nightlife, couples heading to late dinners, groups of friends bar hopping, the occasional taxi honking its way through traffic, normal people living normal lives while my reality crumbled. My phone buzzed. "Where'd you go? Can't find you anywhere." The casual tone of Ethan's text message felt like another betrayal. How could he sound so normal when everything had just changed? I ignored the message, hailing a cab with shaking hands, needing to put distance between myself and this new version of my best friend, this stranger who wore Ethan's face but harbored secrets I'd never imagined. The ride back to Brooklyn was a blur of city lights and racing thoughts. Unrequited love twisted the knife even deeper. He'd never seen me that way, had never seen me that way despite years of friendship and support and being there for each other through everything. Yet he'd risk everything, risk exposure and family disapproval and God knows what else, for strangers in a club, for anonymous encounters that could never lead anywhere meaningful. Back at my apartment, I paced like a caged animal, replaying the scene over and over in my mind, looking for clues I'd missed, signs that should have told me the truth. Ethan's family stories echoed in my memory, his father's rants against those lifestyles, his mother's constant prayers for him to find a nice girl and settle down, the way his relatives still crossed themselves when the topic of homosexuality came up at family dinners. No wonder he'd hidden this part of himself, but that understanding didn't make the betrayal sting any less. Why drag me into his denial? Why let me believe in a version of him that apparently didn't exist? And most selfishly, why waste his sexual awakening on strangers when I'd been right there all along, in love with him, ready to support him through anything? The apartment felt too small suddenly, filled with reminders of our friendship, photos from high school graduation, ticket stubs for movies we'd seen together, the Yankees cap he'd left behind after last week's game. Everything felt tainted now, viewed through the lens of this new knowledge. I tried calling my sister Maria, needing someone to talk to, but it was past midnight and her phone went straight to voicemail. I considered calling my friend Jake, but what would I even say? That my straight best friend wasn't straight, that I was in love with him and had just watched him make out with random men in a gay club, that 28 years of friendship felt like an elaborate lie. Instead, I sat on my couch in the dark, staring out at the Brooklyn skyline, wondering if anything I'd believed about Ethan, about us, had been real. Dawn broke gray and unforgiving as someone began pounding on my apartment door with increasing urgency. I'd been awake all night, alternating between packing and sitting motionless on my couch, replaying every moment of the previous evening, dissecting every interaction I'd ever had with Ethan for signs I should have seen. The pounding continued, accompanied by Ethan's voice calling my name through the door, slurred and desperate. When I finally opened it, he practically fell into my apartment, reeking of alcohol and cigarettes and something else, guilt, maybe, or fear. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and his eyes were bloodshot and wild. "Ty, thank God," he mumbled, stumbling past me into the living room. "Can I crash here? I can't go home like this. My roommate's girlfriend is staying over and she's got that judgmental thing going on and I need somewhere safe." The irony wasn't lost on me. He was seeking safety with the one person who'd witnessed his secret, though he didn't know that yet. I helped him to the couch, grabbed a blanket, and silently tucked him in, watching as he immediately passed out, his breathing deep and troubled even in sleep. Sleep evaded me entirely. I sat in my kitchen, drinking coffee and staring at nothing, trying to reconcile the Ethan I'd known for nearly 3 decades with the man I'd watched in that club. Every shared memory felt different now, filtered through this new lens of knowledge. Had there been signs, moments when he'd looked at men a little too long, times when his stories about women had felt rehearsed rather than genuine? I remembered senior year of high school when Tommy Martinez had asked me if I thought Ethan might be gay, citing the way he defended me so fiercely and how he never seemed genuinely interested in the girls who threw themselves at him. I'd laughed it off, even gotten angry at Tommy for suggesting it, but now. Had I been willfully blind to protect my own feelings? Had I been so invested in my unrequited love story that I'd missed the signs of his internal struggle? Morning crawled by at a glacial pace. I called in sick to work, knowing I couldn't face the normalcy of my office job while my world was reorganizing itself. Around noon, Ethan finally stirred, emerging from the living room like a wounded animal, squinting against the light filtering through my kitchen windows. He looked terrible, pale, shaky, avoiding eye contact as he accepted the coffee I offered him. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of unspoken truths heavy between us. "Last night," he began, then stopped, his voice cracking. "I don't really remember much. I think I blacked out pretty early. Did I do anything embarrassing?" The lie hung in the air between us, so obvious and painful that I could barely stand it. He remembered everything. I could see it in his eyes, the way his hands shook as he lifted the coffee mug, the careful way he wasn't quite looking at me. I couldn't hold back anymore. The words came out in a rush, propelled by exhaustion and hurt and the desperate need for honesty after a night of lies. "I saw you, Ethan. I saw you kissing those guys, multiple guys, so don't sit there and pretend you blacked out." The mug slipped from his hands, coffee splashing across my kitchen table and onto the floor. He crumpled in on himself, his face crumpling like a paper bag. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Please don't say anything. My family, they'd cut me off completely. My dad already suspects something's not right with me. He keeps asking why I haven't brought a girl home in over a year, keeps making comments about me needing to man up and find a wife." Tears welled in his eyes, and I could see the genuine terror there. They'd call it a betrayal of everything they taught me, everything they believe in. I'd lose my job, half my construction crew goes to the same church as my parents. I'd lose my apartment, my cousin owns the building and he's even more conservative than my dad. I'd lose everything, Ty, everything. His denial fueled my anger, but underneath that anger was something else, heartbreak, not just for my own feelings but for him, for the prison he'd built around himself. "And what about us?" I shot back, all the hurt and confusion of the night pouring out. "What about our friendship? I've been in love with you for years, Ethan, years, unrequited, sure, but real. And you hid this while I supported you through everything, while I listened to you talk about wanting to settle down with some nice girl, while I convinced myself I needed to get over you because you were straight." He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. "You, what, Ty? I had no idea. How could I have known?" "Because I've been trying to tell you in 100 different ways," the words exploded out of me. "Every time I suggested we hang out just the two of us, every time I remembered things you mentioned in passing, every time I dropped everything to help you with something. Did you think that was just normal friendship? But this," he continued as if I hadn't spoken, "what you saw last night, it was a mistake. It was the alcohol and the atmosphere and just temporary insanity. I can't be." The pain in his voice was real, but so was the betrayal I felt. He was rejecting not just the possibility of being gay or bisexual, but he was rejecting my vulnerability, my honesty, my feelings. You can't be what? I demanded. Gay, bisexual, human, because that's what you looked like last night, human. Really, genuinely human for maybe the first time since I've known you. We argued for hours, going in circles. Him defending his normal life, me urging self-acceptance despite the challenges that would come with it. We talked about societal pressure, about family expectations, about the very real consequences he'd face if he came out in his conservative community. Coming out means losing everything, he sobbed at one point, his face in his hands. My job, my family, my place in the community. You don't understand, you came out when you were 18 and your family adapted. Mine won't. They'll see it as me choosing sin over family, choosing selfishness over tradition. And staying in the closet means losing yourself, I countered. It means living a life forever, marrying some poor woman who'll never have your whole heart, raising children while hiding who you really are. Is that really better? But he wasn't ready to hear it. The conversation devolved into accusations and defensiveness, neither of us able to bridge the gap between where we were and where we needed to be. Finally, I couldn't take any more. I can't do this, I said, grabbing my keys. I can't sit here and watch you destroy yourself with denial. When you're ready to be honest with me, with yourself, with everyone, you know where to find me. I left him sitting at my kitchen table, still in yesterday's clothes, still clinging to the lie that none of it had meant anything. The days that followed were agony. I wandered through my routine like a zombie, work, gym, home, repeat, while my phone buzzed with increasingly desperate texts from Ethan that I couldn't bring myself to answer. My friends noticed the change in me, but how could I explain what was happening without betraying his confidence? The isolation was crushing. Ethan had been my primary emotional support system for so long that without him, I felt adrift. I'd built my social life around our friendship, and now that was gone, I realized how dependent I'd become on that one relationship. Sleep became elusive. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him in that club, the passion, the desperation, the raw honesty of those moments before reality crashed back in. I found myself analyzing every interaction we'd ever had, looking for clues, wondering what else he'd been hiding. The questions multiplied. How long had he known? Had there been other clubs, other men? Was I just the convenient, straight-passing friend who provided cover for his double life? The possibility that our entire friendship had been built on deception was almost too painful to consider. A week later, on a rainy Thursday evening that matched my mood perfectly, Ethan showed up at my door again. But this time was different. His eyes were clear, his posture straighter, and there was something in his expression I'd never seen before. Resolution, maybe, or exhaustion from fighting himself. I can't hide anymore, he said without preamble, pushing past me into the apartment. I told my family. The story came out in fragments as we sat across from each other at my kitchen table, the same table where we'd had our devastating conversation a week earlier. He'd gone home that day and spent 3 days in his apartment, not eating, barely sleeping, just thinking about everything I'd said and everything he'd been running from. I kept seeing myself in 10 years, he said, his voice steady but tired. Married to some woman I didn't really love, having kids I'd resent because they'd represent everything I gave up, living this half-life where I could never be completely honest with anyone, not even myself. The conversation with his family had been brutal. His mother had cried, his father had stormed out calling it disgraceful and a phase he needed to snap out of. His younger brother had asked if this meant Ethan was going to become all weird and flamboyant, as if sexuality came with a mandatory personality overhaul. But his sister, his twin sister Angela, who'd always been his closest family member, had surprised everyone by standing up for him. She'd reminded their parents that love wasn't conditional, that family meant acceptance, not judgment. She'd asked pointed questions about what Jesus would actually do in this situation, challenging their religious objections with their own faith. It was Angela who really turned things around, Ethan said, a small smile crossing his face for the first time since he'd arrived. She told them that they could either choose love or choose hate, but they couldn't choose both. She said if they disowned me like they did Vincent, they'd be losing 2 children instead of 1 because she wouldn't stand for it. The conversation had lasted hours, moving from anger to tears to tentative acceptance. His parents were still struggling, still asking questions about whether he was sure, whether this was really permanent, whether maybe he just needed to meet the right woman. But they were trying, and that was more than many people in his situation could hope for. My dad actually asked me if there was someone, Ethan continued, someone specific, I mean, and I almost told him about you, about how I've been fighting feelings for you for years alongside everything else. But I chickened out. That seemed like too much truth for one conversation. My heart stopped. Years. He nodded, finally meeting my eyes directly. Since college, maybe longer. Remember when you dated that guy Marcus during sophomore year? I was so jealous I could barely function, but I didn't understand why. I kept telling myself it was because he was taking up all your time because I missed hanging out with you. But really I was jealous of him, of what he had with you. The admission hung between us like a bridge we could either cross or burn down. All those years of unrequited love, of thinking I was alone in my feelings, of watching him chase women while dying inside, and he'd been fighting the same battle from the other side. I convinced myself it was just confusion, he continued. That close friendship could feel like something more if you weren't careful. I threw myself into dating women, trying to prove to myself that I was normal, that I could want what everyone expected me to want. But none of those relationships ever felt complete. There was always something missing, something I couldn't name. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. That night at the club, being in that environment, seeing all those people living authentically, being themselves without apology, something broke open in me, or maybe something finally clicked into place. Those men I kissed, they weren't random hookups. They were me testing something, confirming something I'd been too scared to acknowledge. "And what did you confirm?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "That I'm bisexual," he said simply. "That I'm attracted to men and women, but that for the past decade, the man I've been most attracted to is you. That every woman I dated was being measured against an impossible standard, you, and coming up short." The weight of his words settled between us like something physical. 28 years of friendship, of hidden failings and missed opportunities, of dancing around a truth neither of us had been brave enough to speak. "I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly, misreading my silence. "I know I hurt you. I know I lied to you and to myself for years. I know coming clean now doesn't erase the damage I've done to our friendship. I needed you to know the truth, all of it." But I wasn't silent because I was rejecting him. I was silent because everything was shifting, every assumption I'd held about our relationship recalibrating in real time. The unrequited love I'd carried for so long was suddenly, impossibly, requited. "Ethan," I said carefully, "when you were kissing those men at the club, were you thinking about me?" He flushed deep red, but he didn't look away. "Yes, God, yes. I kept imagining what it would be like if it were you, if I could be that honest with you, if I could touch you the way I'd been wanting to for years." The admission broke something open in both of us. We talked through the night, really talked, with an honesty we'd never allowed ourselves before. We discussed the years of hidden attraction, the fear, the societal pressure, the family expectations that had kept us both trapped in our separate closets of denial. "I need you to understand," Ethan said as the sky began to lighten outside my windows. "This isn't me experimenting or going through a phase. This is me finally admitting who I've always been. But it's also not me expecting anything from you just because I finally got honest about my feelings." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I love you, have loved you for years, but I understand if you can't trust me right now. I understand if knowing I've been lying to myself and to you for this long makes it impossible for you to see me as someone you could be with." I considered this, looking at him across my kitchen table, really looking at him. The stubble on his jaw, the way his eyes crinkled when he was nervous, the familiar slope of his shoulders. This was still Ethan, still my best friend, but now he was also this new person, this honest person who'd finally stopped running from himself. "I don't know," I said truthfully. "This is all so much to process. A week ago I thought you were straight and would never see me as anything more than a friend. Now you're telling me you've been in love with me for years while dating women and hiding from yourself. It's a lot." "I know," he said, "and I'm not asking you to figure it out right now. I'm just asking if we can rebuild our friendship first. The real friendship based on honesty this time. Everything else we can figure out as we go." Over the following weeks, we did exactly that. We started slowly, carefully, like two people learning to walk after a serious injury. Coffee dates where we talked about everything we'd never said before. Long walks through Prospect Park where he told me about the therapy he'd started, about the support group he'd found for people coming out later in life. "There's this guy Marcus in group," he told me one evening as we sat on a bench watching the sunset. "He's 45, was married for 20 years, has 3 kids. He said the hardest part wasn't coming out to his family, it was forgiving himself for all the years he spent living a lie." I could see Ethan struggling with that same forgiveness, with the weight of all those years of denial. Some days were better than others. Some days he was confident and clear about who he was. Other days the old fear crept back in, and he'd spiral into doubt about whether he was making the right choice. His family's journey was complicated too. His mother started attending PFLAG meetings, trying to understand. His father remained distant but civil, still hopping. This was a phase but no longer openly hostile. His brother came around gradually, realizing that Ethan was still the same person he'd always been. Angela keeps asking about you, Ethan told me one day, a shy smile playing at the corners of his mouth. She wants to know if you're the someone special I mentioned. I think she's figured out that you're more than just my supportive gay best friend. What do you tell her? The truth that we're figuring it out, that love is complicated and timing matters, and sometimes the best things are worth waiting for. My own feelings were evolving too. The anger I'd felt at his deception was slowly being replaced by understanding. I could see now how trapped he'd been, how impossible it had felt to be honest when honesty meant potentially losing everything he'd ever known. But more than that, I was rediscovering who he was when he wasn't hiding, when he wasn't performing straightness or denying huge parts of himself. This Ethan was funnier, more relaxed, more present. He was the person I'd fallen in love with, but more fully himself than I'd ever seen him. The physical attraction was still there, stronger than ever now that it didn't feel forbidden or impossible. But we took things slowly, both of us aware that we were building something new on the foundation of something old and precious. Our first kiss happened 6 weeks after his confession, on a Tuesday evening in my apartment while we were cooking dinner together. He was telling me about a conversation he'd had with his therapist about shame and self-acceptance, and something in his expression made me step closer. "Ethan," I said softly, and he turned to look at me with those blue eyes I'd been falling into for years. "Yeah, I'm ready to try," I said. "If you are, I'm ready to see what this could be." He kissed me then, soft and tentative at first, then with growing confidence as I kissed him back. It tasted like coming home and starting a journey at the same time, familiar and completely new. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard, both smiling. "So," he said, his forehead resting against mine, "I guess this means we're doing this." "We're doing this," I confirmed. The transition from best friends to something more wasn't seamless. We had to negotiate new boundaries, figure out how to be romantic partners while preserving the friendship that had sustained us both for so long. There were awkward moments, conversations about past relationships that stung more now that we were together, moments of insecurity on both sides. But there were also moments of pure joy, waking up next to each other for the first time, holding hands while walking down the street in Park Slope, introducing each other as boyfriends to friends who'd seen this coming long before we did. Finally, my sister Maria said when I brought Ethan to family dinner as my boyfriend rather than my best friend, "We've all been waiting for you two to figure it out. Mom's been lighting candles at church for months, praying you'd both stop being so stubborn." His coming out at work was gradual and mostly positive. Construction sites weren't typically known for their LGBTQ+ friendliness, but Ethan had earned enough respect over the years that most of his coworkers just shrugged and moved on. There were a few uncomfortable comments, a couple of guys who made it clear they disapproved, but nothing he couldn't handle. "Turns out," he told me one evening, "most people care a lot less about your personal life than you think they do. They just want to know you can do the job and have their back when it matters." 6 months into our relationship, we decided to move in together. It felt natural, inevitable. We'd been each other's primary support system for so long that making it official just made sense. But it also felt revolutionary, this act of building a life together openly, proudly, without shame or secrecy. The day we signed the lease on our new apartment in Park Slope, Ethan's parents came to see it. His mother brought homemade cookies and asked careful questions about our plans. His father was quieter, but he shook my hand when they left and told me to take care of his son. "They're trying," Ethan said after they'd gone. "It's not perfect, but they're trying. That's more than I hoped for a year ago." Our story became part of the fabric of our community. We weren't the first couple to find love in friendship, certainly not the last person to come out later in life, but our journey resonated with people who'd struggled with their own authenticity. Ethan started volunteering with LGBTQ+ youth, sharing his story with teenagers who were wrestling with their own identities. He was particularly good with kids from conservative families, understanding their fear in a way that someone who'd come out young couldn't quite match. "I tell them," he said after one particularly emotional support group session, "that there's no timeline for being honest with yourself. Some people know who they are at 5 years old. Some people don't figure it out until they're 50. Both are okay. The only thing that's not okay is living your whole life as someone you're not." For my part, I found that our relationship had changed my perspective on love, on patience, on the complex ways people protect themselves from pain. I'd always been impatient with people who stayed closeted, who chose safety over authenticity. But loving Ethan through his journey taught me that courage looks different for everyone, and that sometimes the most radical act is simply admitting the truth to yourself. 2 years after that night at the club that changed everything, we got engaged. It was nothing fancy, just him on one knee in our apartment, with a simple silver band and tears in his eyes, asking if I wanted to build a real life together. "I know we've already been building one," he said, "but I want to make it official. I want everyone to know that you're my family, my partner, my choice." Of course, I said yes. The wedding was small but perfect, our families, our closest friends, the community we'd built around our honest, complicated, beautiful love. His parents came, his mother crying through the entire ceremony, his father awkward but present. Angela was his best woman, my sister Maria was mine. As we exchanged vows in the same park where we'd had so many of those early, careful conversations about truth and love and becoming who we really were, I thought about all the years we'd wasted, all the time we'd spent hiding from ourselves and each other. But then I looked at Ethan, my husband, my best friend, my anchor, and I realized we hadn't wasted anything. Every year, every conversation, every moment of pain and confusion and growth had led us here, to this moment, to this life we'd chosen together. "I love you," he whispered as we kissed, officially married, officially a family. "I love you too," I whispered back, and meant it with every cell in my body. Our story isn't unique in many ways. Countless LGBTQ plus folks battle secrecy, family rejection, internalized homophobia, and self-doubt. But every story of someone choosing authenticity over comfort, truth over safety, love over fear, matters. Every person who decides to live openly makes it easier for the next person to do the same. If you're struggling with your identity, with coming out, with accepting yourself in a world that might not accept you, know that you're not alone. Know that there's no right timeline, no perfect way to do it, no guarantee that it will be easy. But also know that the alternative, living as someone you're not, hiding your truth, denying yourself the possibility of real, honest love, is no way to live at all. Authenticity is a gift you give yourself, but it's also a gift you give to everyone who loves you. Because when you show up as your real self, you give other people permission to do the same. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you discover that the person you've been hiding from has been hiding from themselves too, and that your truth can help them find theirs. Sometimes love really does win.